So hello, welcome back everyone. And we're so excited that today we're starting the preprint training for level 2. I can already see that it's going to be an exciting topic today. So we would like to welcome Jonny again, who we already met at level 1. And Jonny, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So welcome back for the first of 3 in round 2 of preprints. We're going to focus a lot more on specifics with these 3 series. And as you can see today, we're starting with how to actually choose a preprint server. The aim with these 3 sessions is to try and make them run relatively quickly so that there's enough time for a good Q&A and you can kind of ask questions about whatever it is we've just spoken about. Because I imagine people probably have quite a lot of questions about choosing a preprint server. As with everything I present, this is coming from a very biomedical type perspective. I will try and help with non-biomedical fields, but that is my background. That is what ASAPbio does. So it is heavily skewing everything I tell you about. If you do have any questions afterwards, feel free to email me or find me on Slack and ask away. So in level 1, we covered an introduction to preprints and preprint servers. You're going to see some of that session again at the beginning of this one as a little reminder. We did do an overview of the history of preprints to provide you some context, along with the history of publishing and peer review. And we also talked about some of the benefits and concerns around using preprints. Today, it's going to be about choosing a preprint server. Next week, we will do a much more in-depth look at preprint peer review. I'm not going to go and tell you how to do a preprint peer review because you've got other sessions on that. This is going to be more of a step back. What does the landscape look like? Where can you get involved? And then the final session is actually all about getting involved with using preprints, how to expand their visibility. And that one will give you a really good broad overview of the best ways of starting with preprints or really jumping into the preprint world. So today we will do a quick recap of what preprints are, just as a reminder. We'll do an overview of the different preprint servers, and we'll sort of break down some of the questions I've created in one of the slides we'll come up to here about how to choose a preprint server. And then, as I said, hopefully plenty of time for a Q&A. So just to remind you what a preprint is. Preprints are manuscripts that are shared online prior to journal organized peer review. And I just want to really labor this point here because in the fellows program that we run, we've noticed quite a lot of people are slightly getting the definition wrong. It's really important that these are things that can be peer reviewed. And so the important qualifier here is that they are not journal organized peer review. So preprints are free to post and read, and they should always be free to post and read. They are permanent records with a DOI. They are versioned and can be updated. They are citable, they are searchable and indexed by places like Europe PMC, and they can be peer reviewed. Not all of them are, and we'll talk about this more next week. My definition of a preprint is basically a manuscript that is shared when the authors believe that their work is ready for sharing with the world, which covers a lot of that. Preprints are not preliminary versions of an article. They can be in a very positive manner, but that is not a good definition of a preprint. It misrepresents what a preprint is. Most preprints are posted at the time submitting to a journal. So if you're seeing when you submit to a journal, you're not submitting your final version, you're submitting your preliminary work. I think that raises a lot of questions. So I don't like that definition. Preprints are not poor quality or untrustworthy. This comes up a lot and is a huge myth that I really wish we would break free from. Preprints are not just posted by anyone and everyone, and we're going to get to this as one of these slides coming up. They're also not open to having anything posted. There are screening checks in place for preprints. And of course, one of the biggest benefits is that preprints make work available almost immediately. We've already gone through this, so I won't go through it again, but the traditional publishing system is on the bottom here. It's all done in private. It's all a big black box. However, preprints allow everything to be open and done in the public space. which includes getting feedback and ideas and discussions. And this is a really, really important differentiation. So preprint servers. You've already seen the slide during the first sessions with preprints. And I just want to reiterate that there are over 50 different preprint servers just with a biomedical scope. This does not include all of those other ones that are across multiple different fields. And there's a list of things that you should think about when you are choosing a preprint server. And we're going to break these down largely one by one. So the first thing you really need to ask yourself is, what is your work? What is your focus? This could be field specific or it could be quite a general focus. Who is your audience? Is this a local audience? Is this a global audience? Because that will heavily dictate which server you might want to choose. What is the quality of the preprint server? And the big one here is, are there any screening processes in place? There are some preprint servers that do not screen anything, and that is a situation where people really can just post whatever they want. And that is not good. It is not a quality preprint server. That is very similar to predatory publishers, where the big difference, of course, is that the predatory publishers give your work a stamp of approval from peer review, and people trust it a lot more, which is quite dangerous. Does the preprint server have any interactivity with journals or other services? And we'll come back onto that point. What are the restrictions of the server? Preprint servers do not just allow you to post whatever you want on there. Some have very, very strong restrictions on the type of things you can upload. I mean, it's pretty universal that preprint servers will not allow you to upload opinion pieces, for example. And the one that I think is the most important part, what are your values? I'm really, really, really going to labor this point because this is everything I'm about is about values. And I want to, when I talk to people about preprints, I want values to be a central part of any discussion we have. And when you're choosing a preprint server, depending on what your values are, you can choose to support a better scientific communication system or one that is basically what we already have. And I think that's, for me, that's the most important part. But let's break these down one by one. And as I do this, I'm going to give you examples of preprint servers. Again, these are biomedical, largely in focus, but it'll give you an idea as to what to look for. So there are preprint servers with a field focus. And by that, I mean, this may be biology focused. So bioRxiv and medRxiv are heavily focused on biology. They don't really allow you to post things that are not within that realm. ChemRxiv is obviously heavily focused on chemistry. They don't really allow you to post things that are not chemistry-related preprints. Got Earth Archive, you've got AgriArchive, MindArchive, NutriArchive, PaleoArchive. You've got a whole bunch of these. And so you can see that if you do work that is very, very specific and you want to hit your particular field, that influences which preprint server you will choose. But this also comes to the point of restrictions. You cannot post a geology preprint, for example, on bioRxiv or medRxiv. Or not really. Their categories are a bit overlapping. It's a better example. You can't post a physics preprint on bioRxiv or medRxiv. That's what archive is for. And so you've got to keep this in mind when you're choosing a preprint server. There are also preprint servers that have a much more general focus. And these are things like OSF preprints, where really you can post quite a wide range of things on there. Research Square has the same breadth of focus as the Elsevier journals, as the Spring and Nature journals do. And then SSRN has the same broad field of focus as Elsevier journals. So Elsevier, in my mind, is always a bit more humanities. Spring and Nature is a bit more biosciences. And so there is a rough split there between Research Square and SSRN. But they are broad enough that you can get most fields will be covered by those servers. And we'll come back to these kind of differentiation a little bit later. The other question to ask yourself is, what is your ideal audience? Who do you want to reach? This could be a very regional audience. So Africa Archive, India Archive, Japan Archive. This allows you to target very, very particular groups. So maybe you're doing a bit of research that doesn't need to be global. Maybe it's very, very focused on something in Africa, and you want people in Africa to read that work. Maybe it would be better to go for Africa Archive as the preprint server rather than a big global focused preprint server. The other benefit of regional preprint servers is that they often allow you to do things that are not in English. So Cielo here is a really, really good example. This is a Portuguese language preprint server primarily. It allows a few other languages on there too. Whereas if you compare that to something like bioRxiv, everything on bioRxiv must be in English. And so that's a really big benefit of regional preprint servers. And again, it's another way of better targeting your work to the audience you have in mind. The other thing to ask yourself is the server high quality? And what do I mean by high quality? So this is an example of a screening process that one preprint server does. So this is bioRxive's process. And again, we've covered this a little bit, so I'm not going to labor on it. But it's really important to look out for these kind of processes when you're choosing a preprint server, because this is the kind of thing that helps maintain a certain level of quality on a preprint server. This is what stops anybody posting anything. So always check, does the preprint server have screening processes to ensure that only actual science is posted? You want this process to be something that is selecting for certain preprints. This is not a curation thing. It's just making sure that it is real science. Does the preprint server have a positive and a good reputation? This is fairly easy to judge by looking at who owns it or who uses it or what people say when they talk about it. bioRxiv has an amazing reputation. There are others that do not have as strong a reputation. I also think it's really important to look at how a preprint server approaches things like problematic preprints. Does the server withdraw those preprints? And that's just another way of saying retract. It's the same kind of thing. And does it do so quickly? This is a huge problem with traditional journals. They just do not have any incentive to remove problematic papers. They are doing it, and last year was the most retractions ever so far. But they do so under immense pressure and usually after a huge, long, drawn-out process. bioRxiv, because this is the one on the slide, during the middle of the pandemic, they had a number of preprints that turned out to be problematic, and they withdrew those incredibly quickly. There was one that was withdrawn, I think it was within 24 hours, but it was definitely within 48 hours. And so this is a really important part of, again, protecting that reputation, protecting what is actually on the server. I've already said this, but check who owns the server. I've got a slide about this coming up, but it's really, really important to think about who is owning the server. There's a raised hand, so if you have questions, I'll stop now.
Hafsa? Oh, maybe it was by mistake. So go on, John.
It's a mistake. Thank you.
Okay. So come back to who owns the server. Always check that and what their reputation is. And then the other question is, a high quality server will give you interactions and services with, well, interactions with other services. And this is an example, it's a bit of an old example actually, from bioRxiv, because I've got a few more now. So bioRxiv, when you upload your preprint, you could submit it to a journal, or you can submit it to a preprint review service. You can submit it to an external author service, and there's a few versions of that. You can transfer it directly to a journal. You can submit it for community peer review. So there's a lot of different interactions there they add to the quality of the server. Another question you should be asking yourself is, does the server interact with journals or other services? Which is that point I've just made. So most big, high-quality servers will interact with preprint peer review services. So I'm just using bioRxiv, medRxiv here as an example. These interact with a whole bunch of services. These are just some of the bigger ones to name, but they do it with Review Commons, peer community in, rapid reviews, and for the community part, pre-review. This means you upload your preprint, you can send it to one of these, and then if we take Review Commons as an example, so you upload your preprint onto bioRxiv, you can then immediately send that to Review Commons, who will do a review of your preprint, and then you can send that whole thing to one of the Review Commons associated journals. So PLOS is one of the main examples. And so you can see by using bioRxiv Review Commons PLOS, what you've done here is you've broken down that traditional publishing workflow. Now you've got your preprint, you've got your peer review, and you've got that curation step with the journal. And this allows much greater innovation and experimentation with those individual steps. And it also allows you a lot more control over the process. And that's really part of what preprints are about, is about giving authors control. There are also usually a server to journal submission pathway. Again, bioRxiv, medRxiv have this. This is something Research Square has for all of their Spring and Nature journals. SSRN has it for the Elsevier owned journals. What you find with this point is that it usually breaks down as to who owns the server, as to what those journal submission routes are. These also go the other way around. So, for example, if you submit to a Spring and Nature journal, you can immediately deposit a preprint on Research Square. Whether you want to deposit a preprint on Research Square over a different server, however, is something you really need to think about. I think most authors at that point are just ticking the box to say, yes, let's do that, and not thinking about the fact that that goes to Research Square, not a different server. And I've already started to tell you that there are reasons why you might want to choose one server over another. What I've not done in this talk is I'm not going to give you any data about why one server might be better than another one, because that's a research project I have ongoing. I do have some insights if anyone has any questions about that, though, that I can share. What are the restrictions of the server? This is one that, at least on Twitter, I often see people getting into arguments with the preprint servers about, because people try and upload something that is not allowed on the preprint server. So it really comes down to what can you post? A lot of servers restrict posting of things like literature reviews. And this is the main one I see on Twitter. bioRxiv is a really good example of this. Lots of people try and upload a literature review to bioRxiv and it gets rejected because they do not allow literature reviews. Most servers will restrict posting of non-scientific outputs, and this is everything from opinion pieces to editorials. And this is just, it's part of the governance and the structure of the preprint server. There are places you can also post a lot of these other things. So where can you post these other things? OSF preprint is pretty open. You can put almost anything you want on there. I think they now have a small screening process in place, but they never used to. My preferred one is always Zenodo. If I can't post on a normal preprint server, Zenodo is the place to go because it's more of a repository. So if I have an opinion piece, if I have a blog post that I want to be citable, or an editorial, or a literature review, or I've made some materials or a guide or a poster, all those things can be put onto Zenodo. It's a really, really good community-run platform. And then we come down to my favorite part. What do you value? And I just put some questions in here. So, do you support for-profit publishers? You shouldn't, but a lot of people do. Then you would post your preprint to places like Research Square or SSRN. But if you value community-focused servers and infrastructure instead, then you'll go to these kind of places. This is a really, really important question, because if you support for-profit publishers and for-profit preprint servers, effectively we're going to end up with a system that is no different to what we currently have. which I don't think is what anyone actually wants. And so this does need to be part of that decision-making when you choose a preprint server. Some other examples of really good community-focused servers are Africa Archive. Cielo is a really, really good one. The team behind that in particular are lovely folk. So always keep this in the back of your mind when you're choosing your preprint server. And I just want to talk about commercial preprint servers for a little bit. So what I've got here is some points about them, and then I'm going to give you examples. So I'm come back to this point again that community-owned preprint servers do result in a system that is not really that different from what we currently have, severely limiting the potential for real change. The aims and the goals of the commercial servers are not always in the best interests of scientists or academia. And this is because they have a commercial focus. They have stakeholder pressure. They're not working for the community. They do a lot of good things sometimes, but ultimately, that's not what they're here for. So I have tried to be balanced. I've provided some positives and some negatives. One huge positive is that they are much more sustainable because they have this huge publishing powerhouse behind them. This helps uptake in preprinting. So one thing we've seen, for example, with Research Square is that because it's owned by Springer Nature, the preprints are getting deposited to Research Square at the time of submitting to a Springer Nature journal, and that increases the amount of preprinting that we see, which is good. Also bad because people aren't putting any thought into which server it's going to or the actual process of preprinting. The other thing here is positive or negative, depending on your view, but these servers often offer additional services for authors. These are always paid services, but these things, it can be things like copy editing, language help, or other things. Often when you upload to one of these servers, you might be bombarded with emails with people trying to offer you services. Well, that happens with a lot of servers just because of third parties who also do that. But they can also provide a really good infrastructure. And so you sometimes see commercial entities providing the infrastructure for a preprint server, which is run by maybe a funding body, which is an example I'll come on to. There are negatives. I would say there are more negatives, but I've tried to keep it balanced. So I've done 4 and 4. The biggest negative by far is that they result in a very limited change to the system. They do not prioritize community needs. And this attempt to sell extra services, as I said, it's a positive and a negative. But they also lack any ability to access their data, mostly. If they do have it, it's usually not an open system. You have to apply to get permission to do so. And this means the community can't hold the server to account. We can't see what they're doing. We can't see what kind of stuff they post, the quality of the work, where it's coming from. That's a really bad thing when you, again, coming with this community mindset and is reflective of traditional journals. This also means that we don't know what agreements they might have with universities, with funders, with institutions, and how they're gaming the system to their own advantage in order to make more money, which is always at the disadvantage of scientists. So here are some examples of big commercial publishers. These top 4 are some of the biggest publishers in academia. There's only 4 here because Sage is the other one that would make up the big 5 that you might often hear about, but it's not as big in bioscience, so I've left it out. And then I've also got MDPI and the American Chemical Society down here. And like I said, these all own big preprint servers. So Elsevier owns SSRN, Springer Nature own Research Square, Wiley own Authoria, Taylor and Francis own F1000, which is kind of surprising because that's a fairly forward-thinking server. MDPI own preprints.org, and the ACS own ChemArchive. Before I got to the ACS point there, you could have quite easily fallen into the trap that thinking anything with archive in it is maybe more community owned, because traditionally the archive is bioRxiv, medRxiv are. But I just wanted to put this one in to point out that's not true. So you really do need to trace back who owns these servers. I've given you positives and negatives of these. So when Elsevier bought SSRN, just to give you a particular example of a benefit, Elsevier greatly expanded the categories in SSRN. So before Elsevier, SSRN was very focused on the humanities. After Elsevier, it's now anything within an Elsevier range, really. Which is, I guess, is a good thing, but also maybe overstretches the staff. F1000, and this is an interesting case as well that maybe I'll focus on. Taylor and Francis bought F1000. F1000 is almost a example of a system where it looks like the commercial publishers might want to move towards. If you're not familiar with F1000, I suggest you have a look at it, but basically it's a place where you post your preprint and then there are reviews attached to that. And people can quite easily clear if a reviewer said yes or no. And so it's all kind of in one place, which is not too dissimilar from a journal. When Taylor and Francis brought F1000, they haven't actually changed that, which is quite nice to see. And this is now the basis for some other preprint servers as well. So there's an example where they're providing the infrastructure, which I'm much less against. That's not as bad. MDPI own preprints.org, and this, of course, comes back to reputation. So MDPI has a certain reputation as a publisher, and that should absolutely impact the reputation the preprint server has. It's run by the same people. And ACS is an interesting one because they're doing a lot of things at the moment around open science and open access that are somewhat questionable. So they've recently introduced an article development charge, which I think it's $2,500 that you pay before your work goes out for review. And whether your work is accepted or not, you've still paid that money. And then that's on top of the other charges that would come after that. So it's a very, very interesting way to do things. ChemArchive is highly regarded. It's a good preprint server. But that relationship, you should always have in the back of your mind. So I've given you some examples. I'll give you what I recommend, what I use. This is biology focused because I'm not doing any other work, so I can't post stuff on a paleontology preprint server unless I really want to diversify, and I don't. So what do I recommend? Well, whenever I do anything that is lab-based or science communication, that always goes on bioRxiv. It's my #1 preferred preprint server. If I can't post it to bioRxiv, it goes to Zenodo. Because as I said, this is a really, really good community repository. So if, for example, I wrote a literature review, I can't post that to bioRxiv, so I would put it on Zenodo. Now, there's another one here, and this is the thing this is how ASAPbio do things. It's not my personal recommendation, but the other one is OSF preprints. Personally, I avoid that as much as I can. It's just ASAPbio, we have a system where if we can't go to bioRxiv and it's a preprint, we put it on OSF. If it's any other kind of material, it goes to Zenodo. That's just the organizational workflow. If I have something that I can't post to either of these two, then my next choice would be OSF preprints. OSF is run by the Center for Open Science, so it is a community effort. It's great. But I definitely prefer the two on the left here. And always the ones I recommend. So before I talk about the future, one thing we haven't touched upon that I just want to mention again is the data behind preprint servers. So they all offer you different services, but fundamentally it's the same thing. It's as a researcher, what you want is your work to be available for free. So it's free for you to post, it's free for people to read, and you want people to look at it and you want it to get attention, right? That differs depending on your preprint server you choose. There are some preprint servers where the preprints on there get significantly more attention than preprints from a different server. I have a lot of ideas as to why that is, that's work in progress. We have data that we've published on that in terms of, I think it was downloads, so how many people were downloading preprints from the different servers. And it's a big difference. The other difference you'll see on some preprint servers is the geographical distribution of the authors. So work in progress, but I suspect one thing we'll find from this project is that Research Square has a way bigger author base that are based in Africa than bioRxiv does. So it's another thing to bear in mind a little bit with these servers. There's not good data on that yet, but at some point soon, hopefully, I will get this work done and publish it, and then there will be good data on it. So back to the future of preprint servers, just to give you a little bit of a suggestions to where things might be going. We're going to see a lot more funder-owned preprint servers, and we are already seeing this with VeryArchive. So this is a brand new preprint server from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They have changed their open science policy, taking effect in January next year. And as part of that, they decided to launch their own preprint server. A lot of the funders are going down this route if they haven't already got one. And I don't know whether this is the best way forward or not, but it's an important experiment. It's important to see what works and what doesn't work. We will see continued growth of the commercial servers. Again, this is something we are starting to see. I strongly suspect we will also start seeing restrictions or rules that do not align with the scientific community from some of these servers, not all of them. And this is stuff we can't share publicly, but privately, this is starting to happen and should be a big concern. And then the other thing we're going to start seeing in the future, and again, we're already seeing it, is a big focus on the importance of community-owned infrastructure and governance. There are some changes, again, private information I can't share, but there are some changes going on at the moment around this for some of the preprint servers. And a lot of the efforts we're seeing beyond preprints, so preprint peer review or the curation step, there's a lot of community-owned focus in all of that. So I think this is another space that's where things are going to grow moving forward. So I said I want to leave plenty of time for Q&A, kind of have. So I'll stop here for anyone who has any questions.
So much. To be honest, this was one of the amazing sessions that I've ever seen. I've never seen a session that like clearly laid down the scene of the preprint servers and like compare and contrast them. So thank you very much for that, Jonny. Thank you very much. Okay, so does anyone have a question, comment, would like to share their experience?
If not, we can wrap up early. So just while people are thinking. ASAPbio are also doing a few things this year that I thought would be interesting to mention. So we've got a few sessions coming up till the end of the year. There's one missing from here. So there's three in particular I thought would be interesting for this group. So we've got a session this month, or in July, around research integrity, trust markers, and this idea of forensic science metrics, which is correcting the literature, basically. That should be a really interesting session. I'm going to be delivering a session on the history of preprints. You kind of already heard a lot of that. And then we've also got a session with Lamis on preprints in the Global South. And then there's another one in November, which is missing from here, but that is the Gates Foundation are coming in to talk to us about their changes. But these three in particular, I thought would be interesting here. And with that, I'll go back to questions. So there's a question about why some journals make posting manuscript and preprint server mandatory. What kind of benefit do journals get in doing so? Preprinting is the future. It grows every year. There's no real reason to resist it anymore. I would say that because I want everyone to post a preprint. the benefit is that's what the community want. The community want open research. With the publishers helping you post your preprint, effectively they're doing that while still being able to charge you for publishing in their journals. Because the alternative, right, is that the journals just bring their article processing charges right down to the minimum they need to charge and do things that way and make everything open. They're not doing that. Preprints are their way of pretending like they're being on board with all these changes and they are open, without doing a huge amount of effort or damage to their own revenue. And if they do it within their own system, so Elsevier to SSRN or Springer Nature to Research Square, it allows them to keep as much control over the whole process as possible, which is detrimental to science and academia. So with the evolution of preprint servers now, I hope it won't affect the established journal publications later. You post a preprint, you should be able to post in any journal you want at any point. I have heard plenty of stories now around people who are struggling to do that because it's coming up as plagiarized, all that kind of stuff. That is not a thing. It really is not a thing. And if you are getting that, you need to contact the editor-in-chiefs and the publishers to make it clear that's not the policies for journals anymore. There are very few journals who have a policy in place where they will not accept a preprint, especially if you've posted it on the publisher's preprint server. They really, I don't know what they're doing to flag that up as a problem, but they are in the wrong for that. So you really do need to question it if you get that kind of response. On a more broad response to that question, I hope it does affect the established journal publications later, because that's a horrible system. It doesn't work. It's hugely damaging and it needs changing. And preprint servers are a great way of changing that and pulling it apart into its individual bits, where we can actually do a much better job of all the things a journal currently does, just separately. Can publishing on a preprint server impact my chance of getting published in a peer-reviewed journal? Okay, no, I've just answered that. No, it can't. There are some very small journals, and this is definitely a geographical thing, where they do have a problem with you posting a preprint. If that's the case, don't support that journal. That's one thing to never do. But also, like I said, raise the issue, because they really should not be doing that. It is horribly out of touch now. We, ASAPbio, used to maintain a resource on journal policies, and we stopped because we didn't need to do that anymore, because it was not a problem. So if you are running into that issue, shout about it and raise that as a not an all right thing to be having a problem with. Yes, I can share the timetable. And yes, if you post a preprint, you can still publish in a journal article. Any other questions?
So I think while journals approaching you to submit this like this preprint to their journal. So I'm not sure if this is a positive or a negative thing. What do you think of that?
You cut out about halfway through that.
Okay, sorry. I said that sometimes when you post a preprint, some journals approach you in order to submit this preprint in their server. So is this a positive or a negative thing?
So I think that's a positive, right? If you post a preprint, it means you don't have to go find the journal. Sometimes the journals will come to you, which is kind of how, if you think about how we share work compared to any other system in the world, that's what should happen, right? We create this thing, so we've created some content. And then we have to go and say, please take my work. I'll pay you a lot of money. That's wrong. That is really messed up. What it should be is, we've created this bit of work, and then people should be coming to you and saying, this is great. I would love to have this in my journal or with my brand attached to it. If you do something really, really great, people should be competing for it. We should be getting paid for it, but that's a separate question. So I think it's a good thing that preprints allow editors to approach you and say, well, I think this is great. I would love this in our journal. The benefit to you as an author also means that you've got more confidence that at the very least your work will go out for peer review, which is good. And it saves you a bit of time from sort of shopping around a little bit. So I view it for now as a positive.
I think we'll go to Nidal, and then I have something to say about your answer. Okay, Nidal, go ahead.
Okay, continue from what Lemis has said. How I can avoid fake journals if I have that? I received many emails from different journals asking me for publishing my work on their service. Also, I get an invitations to have to write a chapter within their program. So how I can because I asked, they say that it is maybe they are Indian journals, so you have to be aware of what you are going through. Maybe they will, because they propose a fees for submission, so they for submitting my writing the chapter, and then for the publishing also. So how
this is predatory publishing. It's got nothing to do with preprint. It's got nothing to do with posting a preprint. As soon as if your academic email is accessible online, especially if you have published before, whether that's a preprint or a journal article, whatever it is, you will get these emails. And if you're a corresponding author, you will definitely get these emails. I get these emails all the time. It's got nothing to do with what you've published. As I mean, you'll probably agree, right? Most of the emails you get aren't even within your field. They're not always relevant. Sometimes they are.
Yeah.
My approach is to say no. Well, my approach actually is just to ignore it all. But if someone's inviting you to do something, think about how publishing works. When are you ever invited to actually do something? Nature's never going to come along and say, I want you to submit your article to us. It doesn't happen. That's not how publishing works. This is how predatory publishing works. And this is the point in the chat where some journals are demanding money. They do this because people who are not aware of predatory publishing will submit something and then they will get charged for it. And this is how these operators make a lot of money. It's awful to see. I hate it. And it's just a scam. That's what it is. It's people trying to get money out of you. So my response is always just ignore it. Do not do it. But it's important not to conflate that with posting a preprint or publishing in a journal. It's completely separate. You do, if you post a preprint, you do sometimes get an editor who will say, I would love this in my journal. And that is a genuine thing. And these are reputable journals. This is not predatory publishing. This is an editor soliciting an article. Well, they're not soliciting a article, they're soliciting the article you've just preprinted. It doesn't happen a lot. It really does not happen very often. So I'll give you an example with one of my friends. He posted a preprint, and on social media, he was talking about it. And it was on social media that an editor reached out and said, I'm an editor from this journal. I really like your preprint. Would you think about submitting it to our journal? So it wasn't even an email, right? Which could be even slightly more scary and more unsure about what you do there. Now, that was totally legit. That was actually his journal he wanted to submit to, but he didn't initially because his colleagues told him he would never get in there. Benefit of preprinting. It does happen. You've just got to be very, very careful about what you trust. Usually the approaches are very different. But the whole point of the scam is that it looks like it's a legitimate invitation. If in doubt, don't do it. Basically, actually, I mean, if it's not the journal you want to submit in, don't do it. Because when you post a preprint, or let's forget about preprints. When you do a bit of work and you've written it up, when you submit that to a journal, you have a list of journals you want that work to be submitted to.
Yeah.
If anyone contacts you outside that list, that's not real. Ignore it. You wouldn't publish there anyway. It's usually safer to assume someone's not being nice and they're just trying to get money out of you. And I mean, I don't know if there's a predatory publishing session in this training, but there really should be, because it's a huge problem that has absolutely nothing to do with open science. But these people are jumping on that to pretend like it is.
So
Thank you.
just to jump in that point, because what Nidal said is exactly what I was going to tell you regarding the answer, is probably Prince. This is something that we should also tell people, you know, be careful, because some predatory journals, because, you know, this is now like an easy prey. Usually you're the one who submit to a predatory journal, but now here a journal that finds you easily and your work and invites you to submit, and you might get trapped in this scam. So I would really think that as we are making people more aware of the preprints and their advantages, we should also make them aware of the possible hazards that they could encounter, which are predatory journals and other things. Yeah.
Yes, I remember that I have also within their the invited email, they send it to me that I will be as a guest editor in their journal if I accept to submit.
Yeah. This is
Marketing policy.
Yeah, right. That is usually a good indicator that's not real.
Yeah.
No journal will ask for your work and invite you as a guest editor. It just absolutely will not happen. It's difficult because obviously you will occasionally you might get an email where you are invited to be a real guest editor at a real journal. And by real journal, again, I'm using words here that are probably the wrong words used, because these predatory publishers are real journals, which makes it the whole thing even harder to figure out. And like I said, I could probably give you side-by-side email comparison. But the best thing you can do if you get an email like that, anything about your gut doesn't trust it, don't trust it. If you're unsure, Google it. So there's a link in the chat there for a place to go and have a look, which I suggest you all go to and read that. Googling the journal, Googling the editor, all that kind of thing, you'll usually find they're real people. But Google will also surface where people say this is a scam or this is a predatory publisher. And so at the very minimum, do that. But I just want to come back to the point that this is not a preprint thing. This is why I don't mention this when I talk about preprints. It doesn't matter if you post a preprint. Your email address being out there, you will get those emails. It's harder because obviously if you post a preprint, people can have a way into doing that. That looks a bit more legitimate. But often they don't even bother with that. They'll say, I saw your preprint or I saw your paper. It's got nothing to do with how you're putting things out there. But it is something you've got to be really, really careful of, unfortunately.
I think I somewhat disagree with you, Jonny, at this point, because this happened to me personally. For example, I've just submitted the paper that is done from my thesis that like summarizes my whole thesis work, and I've submitted it, and it was automatically the journal automatically placed it in as a preprint, and I got I could say 10 emails from 10 different journals that asked me to post this preprint on their journal. And at the same time, I have some other publications, and this did not happen to me, you know, with these other preprints and other publications. So I do think that they it's not that it's something that only happens with preprints, is that maybe posting a preprint would make you more an easier target for these predatory journals, because they now see the work and they see you, and it's easy for them to contact you. But I do know that it is a problem. Like whenever like your email is out there, you'll have like all of us had those emails. But the thing that sparked my interest is that why was it when I posted this preprint like this sudden I hope that this means that my paper is good, but it also raised an instant fear and concern in me. And maybe this is something that is that might happen to a certain demographic of authors compared to the others, because I don't know, I feel like predatory like people, or I think you might say that this is wrong, but the feeling is that people in the global north are less vulnerable to becoming prey for predatory journals compared to people from the global south. But this could be wrong.
So, look, I get those as well, right? When I post anything, I get about that many as well. So I don't think it's a targeting thing. I do agree with you that the global north are more aware of this, and so we probably don't fall.
Exactly. Awareness, yeah.
The point I'm trying to make about preprints is it's really, if we conflate this kind of behavior with preprints particularly, it's a big reason for people not to post a preprint. And I don't want that to outweigh the huge number of positives to doing it. And the reason I'm trying to separate it is because it is a thing that whether you post a preprint or not, you will get these. I completely agree that posting a preprint makes it harder to differentiate the real ones from the not real ones, because now they have a thing where, like, if they did, so you've got published paper. If someone did that with a published paper, you know it's false because you know journals aren't going to publish a paper that's already been published. With a preprint, you're at the point where you're actively seeking for it to be published most of the time. And so multiple journals might come and say, well, you could post it here, or you could publish it here, or somewhere else. And so it definitely makes it harder. I guess I'm just trying to be careful not to make it a preprint issue. It's an issue. It's a predatory publishing issue, which is it's a whole separate topic that really needs tackling in depth. But it does make it a lot harder. The other thing you might find that is specific to preprints is you don't just get invited to be a guest editor or to publish your paper in wherever it is, or invited to give a talk at wherever conference it is. You will also get things, and this is particularly depending on which preprint server you post on, that are additional services. So you might be invited to have an organization review your preprint for you at cost, or give you a copy editing at cost. And when you post on certain servers, you do get a lot of those. Some of those are genuinely coming from the server or genuine services. Some of them, I mean, it's not predatory publishing, so I'll call it a scam again because I don't know what else the word to use there. But that also conflates it, and that is absolutely a preprint specific problem. And another thing to look out for.
Yeah, I think, Emmanuel, you had your mic unmuted.
Yeah,
I think you're about to say something.
I just wanted to reiterate what Jonny was saying, that it's actually not a preprint issue. I think I had the pleasure of attending the IAP reports when they were delivering the reports, and it is clear that it's something that has existed long before even the idea of preprints became popular. I think these predatory journals have a way of getting access to the emails of researchers. I mean, they have a way of getting them and then sending you emails about whether you want to publish within their journals or not. So it's not really a preprint issue. But like Jonny was saying, maybe because now your article is out there and you are seeking for publication, and it makes it easy for them to know that you are vulnerable. So they can just easily reach out to you, but it's not really a preprint issue. And I think maybe even preprint should kind of give you that form of patience to actually find a proper journal, because if I publish a preprint, then I know my work is already out there. I'll be getting feedback from people that I believe would provide constructive feedback. And then within that time, I can take the time to kind of publish my paper, because a major reason why predatory journals get a lot of people is the pressure to publish. I mean, to have your work out there. So if I have a preprint server and my work is already out there and it's kind of maybe getting some impact or reach, then I should be patient enough to find the appropriate journal. I think that is something that we could look at from this perspective, yeah, in a very positive light. But then there are genuine concerns that we can take away. So it's something that we can work around. And I think I shared a link in the chat. We can go through the report, their suggestions and ways around how you can avoid some of these things. So that could help us avoid some of these predatory journals and conferences. Yeah.
That's a really good point. You can now be a lot more patient. And should be.
Yeah, and I still somewhat disagree with you and Emmanuel on being stubborn at this point, because I feel as we have the responsibility to make people aware of the benefits of preprints, which are so many, we should also take it into consideration to maybe alert them of some of the potential things that could, you know, happen to them. I know it's not a preprint thing, and these things have been happening for ages, but I would feel like I wouldn't feel comfortable not, since this is a concern that I now have, I wouldn't feel comfortable, you know, telling someone about preprints and also not telling them about, oh, it's really good, but be careful, you know, be careful just because of that and that and that.
And you're right. But when we do it, it has to be in the acknowledgement that it is not a preprint specific issue. Preprints make it harder.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
it's a huge area that people need educated on everywhere, because I've nearly fallen for some of those emails.
Exactly.
They're really
They're
good.
so good. They're
Yeah.
so good.
And
They're so good.
Who does not want to be invited as a guest editor or to a lovely
Yeah.
sounding conference in the middle of somewhere beautiful and sunny?
Yeah.
But
And
it's a huge challenge across academia.
yeah, definitely. So I'm wondering, does anyone else have a comment or a question? It's good that we'll still have Jonny for 2 more sessions. So you'll have time to like marinate your ideas and come back with questions if you have. Okay. Amino is asking, the link, Amino, is for the sessions that ASAPbio is organizing for the community. And Jonny, maybe you could talk more about that again.
Yeah, I was just responding.
Yeah.
So I'll share my screen again so you can see the sessions I was talking about. That's my calendar. That's not what you want to see. That one. Right. So the link I shared was for these sessions. So basically what that link does is it will take you to this form, and then you can register for the sessions we are going to run separately here. You can also, if you want to, the links to the other sessions we ran this year are also available. It should work. If not, I'll copy this shorter link in as well, just in case. There you go. But otherwise, feel free to email me if you want to register for any of those.
Okay, then, so I think we could stop here, and thank you, Jonny, very much for this very stimulating session as usual. And we hope to see you next week.
See you all next week.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye
Bye.
bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.